I'm not gonna throw you under the bus.
Yes, you are.
So hey guys, thanks for tuning in today to the College Alternative Podcast. Really appreciate you guys coming out and looking us up. So I'm really excited to be talking to you today about.
Well, you are going to be interviewing Darrell Silver.
Yes.
He's the CEO of Thinkful out in New York City.
Yeah, so Thinkful is, okay, so we all know college is ridiculously expensive, right? So a little background there. Everybody knows that. Very obvious. So, because it's so expensive, there are companies out there that are disrupting the market, right? So they're coming in under cost, underpriced, promising a better product for in a shorter time frame. And Darrell has recognized that the area of computer science is ripe for disruption. And so what he is going to explain is the educational programs his company offers. So that would be front end web development, back end, and data management. So what they do is really actually pretty awesome. So Karen?
Yeah, and not only does he talk about his program and why it is such a unique offering in the field of computer science and why that is so ripe for this type of learning, but he'll talk about how his program also has very open, what's the word?
Graduation rates and job placement rates.
They're very transparent. That's what I'm looking at. Transparent about their return on investment that you get when you go through the program, and he'll talk about how they really work with you and are honest with you even while you're in the program to show you whether or not you're on the right track to being successful and what you need to do to get there.
Heck, those rates are on the front page of their website, which is really awesome. I think that's really, really cool. I mean, can you name one college out there that really does graduation rates and relevant job placement rates? We're not talking like law school where you just sort of get hired as a...
I've been looking at these, and actually it was actually a trade school that had the best...
that doesn't count.
I know. I was like, this is funny. And then I was trying to look in the same area to see if the university had any comparable data on their website, and it was very difficult to find.
Funny how that stuff never shows. So these guys are doing an awesome job, and not only that, but they're also pushing out, trying to influence other similar companies to publish their graduation rates as well. Mm-hmm. So they're leading the way. Not only are they, doing it for themselves, but they're also saying, hey, this is our entire community, and we want to push the entire community forward, which is really, really cool, being a leader in that area in terms of transparency. So not only offering a good product, but being honest about it. So
yeah, so keep listening and find out more about Thinkful and about some of the best ways to learn about computer science.
So thanks, guys.
Interviews with the best in their fields, teaching you how to excel in careers that don't require traditional college. You're listening to the College Alternative Podcast. Insider tips and advice, straight from the experts. And now, here is your host, James Christian.
Well, today I'm very excited to have on Darrell Silver. A little bit of prior history with you. You founded in 2009 Perpetually, which is a web archiving service, which got bought up by Smarsh. Smarsh? Yeah? Is that how you pronounce it? Awesome.
It is.
And then your latest venture here, and I guess it's not latest because you founded this in 2012, but you're the co-founder and CEO of Thinkful. And what is Thinkful, and kind of go into that?
So Thinkful helps people get into technology. Our students are around 30 years old, plus or minus 10, 20 years sometimes. And they're typically working in a job, but they're looking to go into a career that's going to grow faster and that's going to have a brighter future than the one they're currently in. So basically anybody who's excited by technology, excited by programming, excited by software development and engineering, but doesn't like their current job, they don't want their boss's job, that kind of thing. And so we provide the education plus the career services and the community to help them get into a new job. And so we have a bunch of educational programs that last anywhere from 4 to 6 months, where you can enroll and keep your jobs, don't have to forego income, don't have to take on huge risk. And at the end of it, when you're successful, you have a whole new career in front of you.
Okay, well, that's kind of interesting. So you're saying that the average person that's enrolling in your class is around 30 years old, plus or minus 10,
Yeah,
20?
it definitely goes up and down. We publish the stats on the age of our students. So we have students that are early 20s. We've had students that are in their teens, and then we certainly have students in their 40s, 50s even.
Okay. Well, it's kind of interesting. So are you marketing this typically towards the 30-year-old, the guy who's looking to maybe get into a different career? Are you marketing this towards high school students, et cetera, trying to evaluate the difference between going to college versus taking your certification class?
So we tend to market or focus on people that are trying to make a big improvement in their life without having to make a big disruption in their life.
Okay.
Meaning, if you're capable of doing nothing but studying, having no income for a year, having changing cities to go to one of the larger cities in the U.S., then there's a bunch of educational options for you. What we've found, though, is that most people actually just can't afford that, or they have family obligations or life obligations that prevent them from taking on the kind of risk that's required. They don't have the ability for someone to support them for 10 months while they go without income. They don't have the ability to quit their job, or the confidence that if they were to quit their job or whatever they're doing, that they'd be able to come back. And so we focus on providing an educational product and courses that help people achieve their goal without having to go through that big risk-taking part of it. And so that turns out often, we don't choose an age group, but that turns out to be like the plurality of people, or at least the plurality of people tend to be around 30 years old because they've got a few years of professional experience, and they're committed in a few ways in their life, but they're also pretty aspirational, and they have a lot of unfulfilled potential. That being said, like I say, there's no age in there in particular, just the way the student body shakes out.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I'll tell you what, from prior and current experience, 30 years old, you start getting into start having other obligations out there, which, I can't necessarily go back to school full time, what you're saying. So that totally makes sense. So if you can get an online class in an area that you definitely are evaluating as a professional as an area that's definitely growing and will continue to grow for some time, why not go that route? So that's great. So what is it about coding that allowed you to disrupt the educational market?
Yeah, there's a couple of really key things. The most important one by far is that in coding or software engineering or programming, or however these categories of things you refer to them as, and this is true in a few areas, you prove your worth, you prove your ability to do this, to perform in a job or in a career by showing the skill that you have. So instead of showing that you've got a degree from a fancy place, or that somebody gave you a certification, with this skill, you show that you're worth the job by showing that you can do the job directly. Our students do interview prep, and they go through interviews when they're going through our career services, where they're sitting there with programmers and who are asking them coding questions, or they're doing sample projects, or they're showing a portfolio. Those are critically very different than, let's say, the person who's going to do your hip replacement surgery. Not your hip replacement surgery, but one's hip replacement surgery.
Well, maybe 30 years from now.
Surgery. So when I'm going to hire a doctor to do my hip replacement surgery, I'm not really going to do it based on, well, let's do it once and see how you do. And if it goes well, then we'll do it. Then I'll work with you in the future. Like, I really need credibility that person's going to do a great job. In programming, that's just not how it works. I can work with you and do a sample project, and if it works well, if I know what you're doing, and I see that you're always learning and always adapting, then you're going to do great in the job. That's the first major thing. The second major thing is programmers, and this is true in a lot of professions, but it's very, very true in software engineering. You really have to want to learn forever. The field moves quickly. The field has foundations that have been around for a very short amount of time, but in computer science, we think it's a long amount of time. So when someone refers to technology that's greater than 20 years old, people think about that as being incredibly long. But in fact, the foundations of technology are very, very new. And so you can get a good sense of it in a few years, but it takes a lifetime to master. And you never really master because
the acceleration cycle of the tech is accelerating so fast. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Those are two big reasons. Those are the two big reasons. It doesn't take a fancy degree, and it doesn't, and you have to want to keep learning forever. And so education and self-training just make a ton of sense.
Well, it makes a ton of sense in almost anything, though, when you think about it. I mean, as an employer, I would much rather have somebody who's proven themselves in a particular field through project-based. I'd rather see, like, hey, this project, I was able to grow my Instagram account to 1 million users, so why wouldn't you hire me as your marketing guy or et cetera? Yeah, so that totally makes sense. So that's where you're coming from, is project-based examples. Hey, I can do this job. I'm self-motivated.
Right. That's uniquely different than another example, consulting. So in consulting, often the purchaser of consulting is purchasing your services because they need someone with reputation to provide advice that they can rely on for years and years in the future. It's not about the skill you have in delivering the advice. In fact, the same two people can deliver the exact same advice. But if it comes with the credibility of a fancy degree, then consulting, then it carries more weight and has more value. That's very different. That's yet again very different than computer science. And I maybe you should interview a consultant, but my view as someone who's been had the privilege of coding for the last 20 years, since when I was a teenager, like that's how I see the world of consulting. Is it's much more reputation based and pedigree based than it is on the skills, on the things you can deliver today. Which is another reason why you're not going to see it. You're not going to see our kind of education impacting the consulting world, but you will see our kind of education taking over in many, many ways the computer science world.
And so you mentioned you started coding when you were in your teens. Why is it? This is just kind of interesting. Why is it that people enter coding in their teenage years and kind of practice coding in their teenage years? Why don't they try to practice other skills or try to it just seems like coding has definitely got a very set pathway into a career field, right? So you start coding, you practice it, you get really good in your teenage years, you can become a founder of a company, an entrepreneur, that easily segues into a college degree, etc., right? Why is it that why aren't teenagers practicing other skills like they are coding at a young age?
Well, so it's a good question. I suppose the first crack at an answer is coding you can do with your hands regardless of how mature or big your hands are. So if I was like really excited about let's say running a restaurant, when I'm a teenager I can like cook in my parents' kitchen, which works years until I can run a restaurant, but like there's a progression there. I can go from my parents' kitchen into working at a restaurant when I'm 15 or 16, into also the path there. Similar with coding, I can, as long as I've got, and this, I mean, obviously this is crucial, as long as I've got the time in my day and the access to the computer and nowadays internet regularly, and those are big privileges still, then that's all I kind of need, right? If I was interested in real estate development or architecture, right? Imagine how hard it would be to have to build, right? I can build little models, and I used to do that too, but it's going to be almost 30 years before someone trusts me to build a whole building. And so that's the first part of the answer as to why coding appeals, is because it's something you can do without. I mean, you need a lot, but it's something you can do without a huge amount of
resources.
Resources, like people giving you things beyond. There's a small list of critical things you need, and those can be still hard to find. But once you've got that, you can go a long way, and those things tend to be a lot less than other skill areas. The other thing is there's a lot of help around for computer science in a way that there isn't for other skills, because there's such a big community of people constantly learning. So the ability for free, if you have the time to learn on your own and you have the drive to learn on your own, then it's really quite impressive. So like Stack Overflow is the biggest education company that nobody thinks of as an education company, because you can learn a huge amount. You can bootstrap your way to understanding computing. And when I was 15, I had all weekends to not hang out with friends and to sit at home and like code, and that was great. The reason it leads to companies is actually just more of a fluke of the timing of when I learned to code. I don't think there's anything magic about coding and companies. I think it just turns out that the economic drivers, or people that are afforded the option of taking the risk that goes along with starting a company. It turns out like knowing software engineering is good in my generation. I think in a previous generation it used to be other things, and looking ahead it might be other things. But at this time in the world, software engineering is the place to be. Is one of the really obvious places to be in starting a business like Thinkful or like Perpetually.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's big too. Is when you're saying guys in their 30s, they're not just teenagers. They have a little bit larger of a perspective in terms of where the market's heading, and they're seeing that computer science is kind of the future. Well, not the future, but I mean, it's going to be around for a long time, and they're going to have a good, steady job out of it, and that's kind of
Right.
the thing that.
My 15-year-old isn't thinking about their steady job.
Yeah.
I mean, their parent might, but the 15-year-old is thinking like, this is fun. Right?
Yeah.
This is like her parents are thinking like, oh my God, we should support this skill because it has a great career. But that 15-year-old girl is thinking, I want to build a website. Like, I want to show my friends whatever.
Yeah, well, I mean that comes with territory. If that 15-year-old girl wants to sell something online, I mean, why not build a website with it and learn that skill on top of selling and marketing online? And I mean, it just kind of stacks on top of each other.
I'd be shocked if that would be one nerdy 15-year-old if she was thinking about like, I'm doing this now so I can get a leg up on my 23-year-old peers. Like that's not a 15-year-old. I mean,
I don't know. My wife and I are definitely plotting, like, how can we manipulate our kids into thinking that this is fun, but it's really work.
Is this being recorded though? Is this session being recorded? Are we going to be able to watch this? Are your 5-year-old going to be able to watch this?
Yes. They will definitely be watching this. Watch this, learn, realize that.
Learn how manipulated you really were.
Well, we'll just bleep that out. So we talked about coding and why that's successful, because literally you just need a computer and you can find mentors online or find mentors or peers at school. Why haven't other educational areas seen as much success? Or why haven't others attacked the problem in other areas like the marketing, et cetera?
Well, you do see it. You do definitely see it. I think there's a couple of attributes about software engineering that make it go faster. One is it's growing really, really quickly. So the number of the employment market, which if you think of as, I mean, it broadly has two sides. There's the demand, people that have the ability to do the job, and then there's people hiring for that job. There's a big gap there. So in software, there's just now and for the foreseeable, meaning 10, 20 years, there's a huge amount of demand that can't be filled from employers that are trying to hire. And the U.S., frankly, has done a really poor job educating elementary and high school students for those jobs. So if you think about existential threats to Thinkful, meaning like things that just could render our business obsolete in total, there's kind of like, I see them as two. Like one, it could turn out that this whole software thing is a fluke and that like all these companies hiring actually don't really need all these people, and like somehow that demand goes away. I don't think that's all that likely. And on the other hand, there's maybe the U.S. employment system, meaning K-12 education, public-private, and all the surrounding interests. Maybe that system starts creating digital native people in a way that digital native educational programs that train people or help people understand computers or get more people to be excited when they're 15. Maybe the homeschooling market starts to adopt computer science courses earlier on, and people become much more capable of understanding computing beyond the phone layer that they do now, or that kids do now. That's another existential crisis, and it's an existential risk in a sense. Now, again, I don't think that one's going to happen. I think our education system,
the government education pivoting on a dime.
it's tough to imagine that happening. agnostic as to your views on Trump. Like it's tough to imagine that happening, but you can see it in other countries. So like Ireland did it 30 years ago, and you look at people that are coming out of Irish education systems, and they're far more well versed in technical training and programming, and they do it through, from their perspective, inexpensive education, meaning they're not spending $100,000 on computer science programs to go from beginner to first job. They're coming out of high school equivalent with a lot of understanding, and then they focus on it throughout the late teens, early 20s, and that's like works really well for them. Now that took a huge investment from the government, and I don't think that's going to happen. So you got me down this track, and I've lost track of your question. But I think the question was like why? Actually, what was the question? I don't remember.
Why haven't other educational areas besides coding seen as much success going online?
Oh, yeah. So yeah, it has. It's the job growth in coding has been so strong, and the training need is so big. That's why I got into existential risk, because if you could change either one of those, then you'd create a problem for my business. But like, yeah, the need from employers is really strong, and the distance that students are, that young adults are in being able to fulfill those jobs or apply or get hired for those jobs is so big, because the education system doesn't serve them in that way, serves them in other ways, doesn't serve them in that way, leaves a big gap for us to fill. Mm-hmm. And that's at this moment unique in technology training. Now, if you go beyond, if you go digital marketing, if you go business intelligence, if you go data science, if you look at design and mobile design and all the other things around computer science or programming, then they all start to look more like digital skills that are all growing really fast. And the question is, are they exactly where do they fit in the hierarchy of where the market is? And I think that'll change. I think the answer in the stuff that we teach today will evolve naturally. But for the foreseeable, this area, meaning coding, is really strong. I'm curious what you have in mind, actually, when you say hasn't been growing as strong. Like, what are you thinking? Like, how come? Like, what's the thing that comes to mind that you think should be in this kind of education but hasn't seen the kind of growth?
Well, like we were talking about before, like some sort of a marketing or financial base. I mean, what were you taught as a student in high school about finances or wealth creation, et cetera? Yeah. And that's just, it's non-existent. I mean, a lot of people, my peers, were taught how to balance a checkbook. I mean, that's so far and below what you should be taught about money management, et cetera. And then the marketing side of the house would be interesting too. How to do marketing, how to do some of these skills that probably could easily be educated on. But I mean, what you're talking about as far as the educational system having to be pivoted or pivoting to reflect current and future job trends, I think that's I don't know if that's going to happen anytime soon. You were talking about Ireland. I mean, there were some growing pains there in terms of expenditure of money and I guess common thinking. Well, I don't know. Yeah.
So there's a couple of answers that brings up another good point, which is that critical in our education is that our students get a very clear sense, and we should talk more. I mean, this opens up a whole bunch of conversation, but our students need a sense of return on investment of their time and money before they're going to enroll. That's absolutely cornerstone, key, critical to our program succeeding and students enrolling, is that they see that what it's going to cost and whether it's going to be worth it, and how long it's going to take. And so things like anything that for which the ROI is less clear are much, much harder to do in a system like ours, where there's no accreditation or 250-year history. We are under a lot of pressure to show return on investment. And so like balancing your checkbook or managing, affording a mortgage and planning for that, or planning for retirement and financial planning in general, and IRA investment, and how to manage paying your taxes, like those things are unbelievably valuable. And I think you're right, the literacy on that world is severely lacking. But from a provider, like from a school's point of view, it's very hard to measure the ROI, and it's very hard to articulate that to the student. And so, we as a company, or like we as a society, we kind of rely on the public education system to provide those services because they're harder to define the success, but we trust that the success is important for all. And so, like we need the public system to provide that stuff because we are in an ROI environment, and that those kinds of skills are not. That being said, I'm sure you can find a ton of incredibly good, free, and low priced stuff that teaches that stuff. It's mostly about the energy of the person trying to learn it, the motivation of the person who wants to learn it, and that's a whole other area of interesting topics you can go to.
Yeah, exactly. So what inspired you to create Thinkful? You're already successful, with Perpetually, and you're already successful with life there. What made you want to create another company and go through the pains of another startup, and why in this area?
Yeah, well, I mean, I hopefully consider myself quite early in my career. Maybe I look older on this scope, but fundamentally, one of the things I learned like a bunch of years into my working life, after my first kind of professional office job, so to speak, was, and I only realized this in hindsight, was I was given a lot more leeway than I deserved on some sort of on paper by my first boss, basically. So in my first job, I was working in the finance sector. They needed someone to do this particular, basically a night shift. And I say night shift is like you work until 10 p.m. and you're doing something in like a foreign market because you're on foreign hours. I'm in New York on this like Asia schedule. And they needed me to do this one job. And then like that's all I needed. But then I like found this opportunity to do some other coding. It turned out to be software engineering, blah, 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 to automate some part of the system. And it was an area that nobody had ever worked on in our company. And so when I started working on it, it turned out just by fluke that this was an area that was really valuable and a really big impact on the business. And my boss for about 6 or 9 months said, are you doing your primary job that like I have you doing on like doing this thing at night? And like at the meantime, I was like, I have all this extra capacity, so I'm gonna like do this other thing also. And she sort of left me alone. She just like let me do that, gave me a ton of room. And it turned out to be really important to the business, turned out to be really informative to what I wanted to focus on in my career. And I realized after that I'd been given this opportunity to like, in effect, punch above my weight class, meaning I'd been given a lot of freedom by my manager. As long as I did the stuff she was asking, everything else was great. And for years, I just thought, okay, well, that's how you're supposed to manage people, right? Like, give them like ask them for one thing, and then if they're going to overperform and if they're going to do something else, then you just let them do whatever they want. And it turns out that's really rare. But basically, like because most managers like try to optimize for filling your schedule effectively. Yeah, and that's like not took to realize how rare it was to have a manager that did that for me. Basically, that's Thinkful as a business. That's Thinkful's business model, right? We find people that are really aspirational, that have bigger appetites than what they're currently getting in their current life, in their current professional life, and we help them punch above their weight class. That idea. So I came at it from the side of this is a way to achieve more than what the world is sort of like demanding of you. And my co-founder Dan came at it from the side of this education mechanism. This thing should exist. It should be a way to learn, regardless of where I am, and learn over my computer and connect with people and have one-on-one mentorship. And he came at it from the education pedagogy side. Mm-hmm. And lo and behold, the two of us got along personally, and lo and behold, these two ideas were pretty compatible. And so we started working on what became Thinkful back in late 2012, almost 5 years ago, 4.5 years ago.
Did you ever initially see pushback on your idea to go online, to do this online? You have to get a degree, a CS degree from a good university to be able to get hired, to have your students get hired by good software companies, et cetera. Did you ever get that sense from people?
It's funny, actually. I think our story is a bit reverse of a lot of people. When we started, and nobody really took it, or many people didn't really take it all that seriously, except for the small number of people that were crazy enough to trust us as our first students. They just kind of ignored what we were doing. And
Which is
I think
always good for a startup. Which is always good for a startup. With
yeah,
big
right.
competitors.
Just don't worry about us. We're doing our thing. We got customers and students and mentors and employers that are all happy. Like, we'll just do our thing.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the story. But then what happened was, as there started to be more students graduating from Thinkful and from other programs as well, you started to see, and you still see this today, pushback from people that have had the luxury of coding since they were 14, saying these people coming out of these short programs are not, they don't know the fundamentals. They don't know the basics. They don't know, they can't perform at my level. I would never hire them. And what we've found is that there's, well, I guess personally what I found is I've gotten a little bit more offended by that attitude, not because it's wrong, but because it's so specifically focused on one type of programming, and it doesn't leave the door open for anybody that didn't have the luxury of knowing what, number one, knowing what they wanted to do when they were 14 years old, and number two, having access or the time or the privilege, frankly, to do that stuff when they were 14 years old. And so, in my mind, anything that helps people more easily direction or take risk in their career is a good thing, because it provides more fluidity or like in a financial sense, like liquidity is good. Like letting you move around is good, and letting you find your place in the world is good, and fulfill your potential is good. Anything that says you weren't doing this for the last 20 years, therefore you're not qualified, is bad, because if it's going to take you 20 years, then you missed the chance already, which is just negative. It's just not the way it should be. It's almost anti the American dream of discovering your future potential. So what I found is that, in fact, the pushback has come from a segment of the population, segment of the computer science world or technical world, that only thinks in terms of computers that are you have to have been steeped in the Stanford, Columbia computer science departments before you're considered a serious computer scientist. And if you're not a serious computer scientist, then you have to have at least done something that's incredibly popular, like create one of the 5 really big breakthroughs in web development of the last few years. And if you haven't done those things, then you're just not aware of the fundamentals, and you don't really deserve to be in it. I'm not going to pay attention to you. Mm-hmm. And there's something really wrong about that attitude. And it's frankly counter to what I think a lot of people also believe, which is that computer science accepts anybody. Computer science and computers are very merit driven, and the computer industry is really merit driven, and quality shows up in your work, not through your pedigree. And so I look forward to having this debate more and more in the coming years, because it's one that
you're getting good at arguing against.
I think people don't. I don't think people disagree with me. I just think the world is more complicated than they're making it out to be. There's technical jobs that require full knowledge of 75 years of computing, and then there's technical jobs that don't. And being in one side of that and only thinking about your side is only thinking about one side. So let's broaden the context of what we mean, and let's not be judgmental toward the others. And so I think it's going to be a fun debate, because at the end of the day, we kind of really agree, and we just have to think about it from other people's perspective, and it'll all work out. There's no partisanship. There's only debate, and so that's going to be fun. And so that's the pushback we're getting today, us and our peers, frankly. And we're just at the beginning of that. That's going to get that critique is going to get stronger before it disappears, basically.
Yeah. So what you're saying is you're still seeing a little bit of the echoes from the 1980s, 1990s, where coding is kind of not very common. It's kind of one of those rebellious things where you're kind of just learning kind of on your own, and you're kind of starting it up on your own, and it's kind of a rebellion sort of thing, versus nowadays, which you're definitely starting to see this progression of everybody has to learn, everybody has to have some level of computer knowledge, programming knowledge, to be able to be successful with their careers, regardless of if you go the web development route for the actual learning HTML or whatever. So you're kind of seeing that kind of juxtaposition kind of vying for a little bit
there's
of
a little bit of sense of there's a little bit of sense of if you don't know X, then you can't be a real programmer.
Yeah. Well,
Which
what's
is
a
like,
real
okay,
programmer? Yeah.
yeah, so you're gonna create these barriers to entrance into a club of real programmers. Like that's not really in line with our thinking around that this should be a skill-based or an output-based profession where you prove yourself with your work and you learn all the time. And I think those two views are going to clash, and it'll be good because in the end, flat meritocracy and learning are going to beat walls and clubs. And so that's why I look forward to the debate. And I think the people that are arguing for, hey, I've been doing this for 20 years, how dare you call yourself the same title as me, are going to start to realize like the title isn't really the thing that matters. What matters is what you're doing, if you're good at it, if you're learning, if you're growing. I'm not competing for jobs with you. That's just not how the market works for the next 30 years. Like we shouldn't be excluding other people from the race. We should instead be training and teaching. And in fact, that's a lot of why. So to sort of pivot our topic a little bit, the reason that mentors at Thinkful mentor at Thinkful is because they see that there's a huge world out there of people that are aspirational to gain the skills that they have, and it's a lot of fun to help others learn that don't know something you know. That transfer of knowledge is truly fun. I think if you could examine if you sort of stuck diodes on people's brains, you discover that they lit up in good way, in healthy ways when they were giving knowledge, when they were transferring wisdom, and that's one of the biggest reasons, the top reason we survey our mentors. It's the top reason people mentor at Thinkful is because they like that transfer of knowledge. They like giving something they know to someone who wants to know it. And that's the way the world should work, basically.
Mm-hmm. So that's a big thing that you guys are doing as a company, is providing mentors, not just the actual skills, but actually providing a mentor for your students here. Can you talk a little bit about that? What inspired you to do the mentorship aspect, and do you feel as though that's necessary?
Yeah, I'm happy to. We've always provided one-on-one mentorship for every single student at Thinkful, meaning you meet in a session like this, talk about the work you've done, talk about where you got stuck, get feedback on things you could have done better, places you should go deeper in learning or skip over if you're already proficient. That dynamic has always been there since the very beginning, when it was just me and Dan being the mentors for our first 5 students. It's funny, like people ask all the time, like, why do you do it that way?
Yeah.
I almost want to say, like, well, it's actually kind of like the opposite. It's like for millions of years we've learned through apprenticeship, and we have reading and we have video and we have recordings, audio, but apprenticeship is truly unique. The retention of knowledge, the speed of acquisition of knowledge, the attention you get from a student when there's a direct one-on-one connection versus a classroom are all off the charts better than any other form of learning. And so it seems the question is almost, why isn't all learning done this way?
Yeah.
When Dan and I started the company, we said, well, there should be like the kind of starting point was, well, there should be a way to learn online the way that he and I have had the pleasure of learning for our whole lives, which is apprentice-based, roughly speaking, tutor or apprentice-based learning. And so that's how we started. And it just turns out like the world has a hard time. It's very hard or typically very expensive to create the system that allows that much expertise to like go one-on-one. Like the reason classrooms are so popular is because it's just a lot easier to force you to be one of 30 in a classroom, listening to one expert and disseminating knowledge one to 20 like that, and in a video 1 to 1,000,000 like that. And certainly that can work, and some people prefer it. But generally speaking, students are far better off when they're learning through a smaller and smaller environment down to the one-on-one connection.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think that is something that's very special. I think that's something that makes you guys unique in recognizing the fact that it's not just pushing out programs and having online tests or being very impersonal, because that would probably be easier for a company to do, is just push out less web lessons and web content versus that actual trying to establish that connection there.
I don't know. So it's funny. It might be easier. You talk to companies who do curriculum as their curriculum is written, as opposed to ours, which is written and delivered live. Basically, and it's hard. Videos are hard. They're hard to update. We update faster than video-based learning, not because we're so magic. I mean, we are, sure, but like not because we're so magic, but because it's actually just easier to disseminate new information and to update products versus a video where you have to reset up the stage and you have to find the same on-camera person and you have to script it perfectly and you have to do 10 takes. Like, it's just far more expensive to do it that way. So we tend to be faster because of the fundamental structural way the system is built versus video. But it's really hard. Doing video and doing written curriculum is really hard. I mean, online written curriculum is easier than published written curriculum. Like, imagine publishing a textbook, annual cycles. It's horrible. So it's sort of like those things are really hard.
The folks college textbooks, $300 for a college textbook.
Yeah, exactly. Spend an hour talking about that.
I want to sell my college textbook back to you. Oh, okay. Well, it's 20. I'll give you $20 for it. Oh, well, that's yay. I can afford lunch now. What kind of matrix do you guys, when you're talking about ROI, return on investment, for your students here, what kind of matrix do you use to look for success for your students? And what kind of examples have you seen for as success?
Yeah, the great question. So the top line answer is salary that you're going to have as a starting point versus your current salary. So the delta provided in salary for successful students. That's the direct ROI. What we find basically is that successful students make make 2 or 3 times. The number is about 2.5 times their tuition in their first year salary after Thinkful. And so we think of that as being a pretty successful ROI.
Wait. 2.5 times the amount?
2.5 times the tuition. So if you're spending anywhere from $6,000 to $9,000, $12,000, like $14,000, so 6 to 14, it's a big range, but 6 to 14 grand on your tuition. Yeah. You're getting, our successful students have an average of between, and it varies, we update the number every month, so we see it very, very frequently. You see a 19 to 20-ish, just above 20, like $19,000 to $20,000 salary increase on the first job after the program. So you put in 4 to 6 months in the program, you put in 4 to 6 months in the career services. At the end of that, you're going to have 19, 20 grand in increase. You're going to have spent anywhere from 6 to 14 grand. You're going to have a $20,000 increase in salary. Now, it's not easy to do and people fail, but that return on investment is well worth it in the first year alone, let alone the cumulative earnings over the course of your career. That's the first and most important thing. The second thing is clarity about whether you're on track to succeed before you've spent all that time and money on the program. So our students are expecting, or they should expect, and most of them do, they expect a lot of clarity into, am I tracking for the success that others have found, or am I off track? And if I'm off track, what are we going to do about it? Am I going to stop? Am I going to pause? Am I going to work double hard? Am I going to change exactly what I'm studying? And we help them through those transitions. So we do a lot of work to make sure that students are clear about their chances of success, not just when they end up as a part of our statistics, the outcome for future students, but along the way throughout the entire program. Those are the two things that matter, that take Thinkful from being a place where people learn today into an institution that will last into the future, is that transparency into likelihood of success and what success means in verifiable, clear outcomes.
Yeah, and that totally makes sense, especially your first one there, as far as what is my ROI, what's my return on investment here? Why am I spending 6 months doing this? When am I going to get it back? And it makes total sense that you're tracking that, and that's your first priority, because what am I getting out of 6 months of my life? Oh, well, you're going to be getting, an additional 2.5 times your salary or above and beyond. Well, now I'm starting to listen.
Right.
You know?
Exactly.
And then as far as the timeline goes, keeping yourself on track versus everyone else and what your success rate is based upon where you are in the program, that totally makes sense too. Because I could see something where you could get a little discouraged if you're kind of falling behind. You don't exactly know why or et cetera. You guys are kind of helping keep that pace going. So that's great. So why are you guys publishing every month? I was looking at TechCrunch, and this is kind of what attracted me to you guys initially. Is you guys are, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were the only ones as far as the e-learning side of the house for programming that signed on to be transparent and publish your success rates and your graduation and placement rates. Why did you do that?
So there's two questions there. Let's do the second one first. So we're definitely the only ones right now in SIR. We're the only online school. We're the only self-paced school, meaning students don't have to quit. They can keep their job while they learn. We're the only ones right now, but I prefer to think of it as we're the first as opposed to the only, because I think the only way SIR is going to succeed is if the other reputable programs join. And I think the definition of reputable is partially made up by the fact that you've joined and like you've actually adopted the SIR standards. That's important. So we did it because we think the group that Skills Fund had pulled together was really strong, and we said it was worth the risk that this is going to actually come to pass. And it was a lot of work frankly, we didn't put in as much work as others, but it was still a bunch of work for us. And we just thought this needs to exist, first of all. And Skills Fund plus the group of schools that had come together, including Thinkful, were capable of pulling it off. And we liked the Skills Fund approach. The Skills Fund approach was very startup friendly, basically. It was, we're going to focus on the most important thing, and if we can succeed there, we're going to go to the other things that are also critical long term. And the most important thing is defining a standard that works across many, many schools. More than half the schools in this part of the education world are signed on to SIR. We're going to define a standard, get everyone to work on that. A lot of herding cats in that problem, a lot of long phone calls, that kind of thing. But we're going to do that. And once we do that, we're going to be in a great position to make an organization that has a funding model that makes sense, where there's dues to be a member, so that not to make money, but just to keep it sustaining. We're going to work out the kinks in the version 1 of the standard, which we have some strong opinions about what those improvements should be in version 2. And we'll be talking more about that in the coming weeks. And then others are going to have similar or different opinions. And so Skills Fund solved in a way that I thought was most practical to actually being successful, most likely to be successful. And that differed quite a bit than some other efforts, which were valiant efforts, but just are doing it in a different way, and it may still work out, but are not really there yet, which are like, let's get some fancy institution involved, or let's get the White House involved, and we're going to announce something, but it's not really going to have any delivery on the back end, like nothing's going to happen. Or we're going to plan for a timeline that takes 2 years, and we're going to figure out funding source first. Like those approaches might work in the long run.
Yeah, but let's get something on paper first.
With a startup in the long run, you'll be dead. So you got to think what can we actually deliver that's going to get us to a great place, and then what are we going to work on to get it to an even better place, and then what are we going to make it long-term sustainable? And that's the way you build something in a startup, and that's the way you build something fast, and that's the way you build something durable. And because we got more than half the students in schools representing more than half the students, we think we did a pretty good job. So yeah, I don't think we're the first, but we're not, and we will, I guess in the future we'll always have been the first, but I hope we're not the only, because it's going to take, because there's other schools that should adopt common standards that defining success. That's the only way the industry is going to succeed.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think that totally makes sense. And I think, you're running around doing a lot of legwork on this, but I think ultimately that the return on investment is going to be great for you guys and for the industry itself, for the educational industry, that set standard, establishing some sort of a credibility there. Yeah.
Especially when regulators come up, that's like our big. That's like what I think is the even bigger thing on the horizon, which is also really interesting. Nobody wants to talk about. It's very interesting.
So describe your program a little bit here. I know we've kind of hit on various aspects here, various points. You guys have a mentorship program. It's about 4 to 6 months here, but kind of if I was interested in doing this, where would I go to apply? What am I getting out of it? What are you training guys in, et cetera, all that stuff?
Yeah. So we offer a web development program in two flavors. One is fully flexible. This is the thing that we've been working on now for 3 years. This is a flexible web development bootcamp, which is basically you can or you don't have to quit your job. You don't have to have a job, but it's tied around your schedule. Students work 20, 25 hours a week. They work with a mentor one-on-one for three distinct hours that they pre-schedule every week. They can then go to up to 40 hours of office hours every week, which are like small group sessions where you can just hop in and get a question answered or listen to other students or just connect with others in the network.
Okay.
Those program is self-paced. It lasts about 6 months. Students have done it in 3, but we don't recommend that. It's too fast. Students have taken as long as like 9, but that takes quite a while. It's time to take 6. Students tend to do it in about 6. And that the whole reason to take that program is because you're looking to break it. You're looking to get your first programming job. And so that educational side is that 6-month period piece. While you're in that program, and you're also preparing for the career placement side, meaning the career services, the resume, interviews, what you're going to talk about, what your portfolio looks like. And you get interviewed along the way by people that are doing interviewing for a living that challenge you on depending on where you are in the course, challenge you on the topics you're learning. Now, once you finish the educational side, all the 20, 25 hours a week you spent learning the core skills gets transferred into ramping up the career services, meaning much more time on networking. You had spent some already, but much more time on networking in your area, and especially in the local city or the job market you want to be in. Time connecting with employers, working with our team on what employers you want to reach and finding those and getting into them. And we do a lot of intros for students. We tend to introduce students to, on average, 5 employers on average per student. It varies 4 to 6. And then students do basically an equivalent amount as part of finding a job. And that goes on for 6 months. And so that's the second half of the program. Now, that web development program, that flexible one, has been incredibly popular, and we've become really quite well known for it. We also run a full-time version, which you can't have a job when you're in the full-time version. It runs a little bit more like a classroom. It's still fully online. It follows the same syllabus. That program is a little bit shorter, 4 months instead of 6, 5 months instead of 6, and it's on a fixed schedule. Both of those two, they both share the same career services department. Both of those two are the same basic curriculum, full stack JavaScript, front end and frameworks, and you can choose a few different options: React and Angular, or you stick with jQuery, which is quite well covered. And then also back end with Node and a variety of other tooling that goes around Node, so databases and Redis and all the other pieces. That's that stack. Those are those two programs. The last program is our newest one, is data science, and this is a flexible data science program, which we're pretty excited about. We've seen a really strong response to, which is basically building analytics and building business intelligence with data at scale. And so we've had a really interesting set of initial students going through this program. It's also fully self-paced, so I think almost all the students, if not all the students, have full-time jobs now. They're doing this program while enrolled, so it's just like our Flex program that we've gotten to know so well. I call it Flex, the Flexible Development Program.
Yeah.
And that program is getting going. We have one of the lead data science engineers from Uber came to join Thinkful to write the syllabus for that. Our head of education has been working with him to get it done. We have a data scientist from the Max Planck Institute and who's working on the curriculum with us. So we're pretty excited about all that. And that's rolling now. That's been out since about January.
That's really, really cool. So me as a layperson, though, if I didn't get into computers at age 14 or 15 or really wasn't involved in that world, how would I go about deciding front-end web development, back-end web development, or data science?
That's a great question. The big mistake people make is answering that question too early.
Okay.
And the reason they answer that question so early is because typically you need to enroll in a class that teaches one of those things, and you enroll for a class that you enroll today for a class that's going to last 5 months, it's going to cost you 15 grand, and so therefore you have to decide at the day you enroll what to do.
Yeah. And you're locked in.
Our program, you have to lock in because you're in a classroom. The classroom moves at a pace. The classroom covers our syllabus. Everyone in the room has bought into that syllabus. Our program, our flexible program, says, look, as a beginner, you don't know what you don't know. It's impossible to make an informed.
Exactly.
It's impossible to tailor to the you don't even know what to Google. You don't know what words to use in a search to figure it out. You don't know how to evaluate job listings in your local community. So your chances, all those things are just impossible for you at that beginner stage. And so in our flexible program, what we do is we start everyone off in the same place, but as they progress through the course, they start to focus their projects, what their mentor works with them on, the parts of the curriculum they spend more time on, toward the interests that they find themselves attracted to throughout. And that customization is absolutely critical.
Oh yeah,
because
I would totally agree with you.
It makes an informed decision as opposed to along the way, based on what you know, as opposed to having to make the decision and then just live with it. And so it's natural to the flexible program and the one-on-one mentorship program and the anti-classroom idea. It's not natural to a classroom. And so anyone who's asking that question, I would say, look, don't get ahead of yourself. Don't
just jumping right back into the conversation. I think that's totally critical because I think that's partially how your customers and the students that you get into your program kind of got into the first place is they kind of locked into already a program in school. They maybe not necessarily liked it, but that's what they got into, and that's the job that they kind of went down and the career path they went down.
Yeah.
But that flexibility is just so big. Like you were saying, like as a layperson, how am I supposed to know what's right for me right off the get-go? That's very unfair to do. So I'm glad that you guys are going that route. That's awesome.
Yeah, and frankly, it's only because of the model with the educational pedagogy. It's not possible in a classroom-based model. You have to follow a fixed curriculum in a classroom. In one-on-one and in self-paced, it allows you the freedom to make a decision based on what you know, as opposed to having to make a decision that's full of risk that you don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Two final questions for you here. And it's kind of I know we're wrapping up on time here, but what are the job prospects for web developers? And this is kind of why you went this route in web development, because I'm assuming the job prospects are really, really good for your students. And then also, are employers hiring people from your online programs versus just a traditional college education?
Yeah, well, so we offer for students in cities that we know for a fact have at this moment far greater demand for the skills we teach than we could ever supply. We provide a money-back guarantee, meaning the students that are, if you're in Austin, Boston, Boulder, Chicago, Dallas, Miami, Los Angeles, Oakland, Salt Lake City, like a whole host of cities, and we have that list on the website. If you're in those cities and you go through our program and you do it on time and you put the work in and you still don't find a job, we'll give you your money back. We can't give you your time back, but we'll give you your money back because we know the program will work under those circumstances. Now, it's not easy, right? But we do that, and we do that because we know the demand is there. We know the demand is there in a lot of other places too, but in these markets in particular, we're really confident, and we have enough data to know. And so we keep a pretty close eye on that because we're making a lot of promises that we need to be able to keep for students. And so we keep a really strong eye on what the market is asking for, what employers are looking for, and we look at our employer network and make sure that they are still excited about working with our students.
Yeah, and are you seeing employers actually hire people from online classes as opposed to just getting your CS degree? Yeah.
Employers don't care about the degree. Like, the employers don't care about the degree. They care about whether you can do the job.
Yeah.
They also care about, do you have a coherent story around how you got to where you are today? Do you have a coherent understanding of what your challenges were and why you made decisions? I mean, there's a million things that go into an interview that help you be successful, but the degree is really a small part of that. And speaking as a guy who's in his mid-30s, like, the degree is important. It was important when I was 22. Became much less important immediately when I started taking a job. One of the phrases that I like that's a holdover from my days on Wall Street is, you're only as good as your last trade. Meaning, and in this world, what that means is, if you can do the skill, if you prove that you can do the skill today, and you can show me that you have ability and interest in tomorrow's skills, then that's what I need as an employer. That's the person I'm looking to hire. I'm looking to hire for the future. I'm not looking to hire about something. I'm not looking to hire, if you're 25 and you're showing me that you got into Yale, it matters very little to me what you were doing when you were 17 years old and how good you were at getting into Yale at that time. Like, think about it. It's irrational. That's the difference in the difference in the person when they're 25 and when they're 17 and a half or whatever. Like, it's a whole different person, right? So that stuff matters very little. Now, what does matter is, did you spend your time wandering around doing nothing, or did you do something that was really interesting, or did you have a really interesting approach to the world that led you to do something interesting, or did you try something and it failed, and do you understand why it failed? Did you try something and it succeeded, and do you understand why it succeeded? Like, did you spend your time in a worthwhile way, and can you do the job I'm hiring you to do, and can you do the job I need you to do in the future? Those are the things people care about. The degree is not the place to fret or to focus. It often makes parents feel better that you're going to go to you're going to go to Northwestern instead of some school they haven't heard of. But that doesn't mean you should do it. That only means you should balance making your parents happy with all your other.
One final question for you here. One final question. What would you like to see the educational system look like in 15 years from now?
My core answer, big question. My core answer is anything that aligns the student with the school, or really better said, the school with the student, is going to be good for the education system. So anything that aligns Thinkful's interests with our students' success is going to serve, in the long term, Thinkful well and the whole entire industry well. So when we're on the line for student success, we perform better for students. When our interests are aligned, we perform better for students. So when we suffer a penalty when our students don't succeed, it'll be a lot easier for me as an executive to get my team to focus on helping the student than it will be if we profit regardless of whether our students succeed. Mm-hmm. So what I hope in the next 15 years, and what I'm working on and what we're all working on here at Thinkful, is making sure that the education system structurally aligns the school's interests with the students' interests. And ROI, transparency, clear reporting, real-time updating of statistics and performance of the students that attend the school is one way of doing that. We think there's others, but around financing of the education and other things. But that's the area that we think is most ripe as a thesis. So anything that aligns the interests of the school with the students' goals is going to be good. And anything that looks like a separation is bad. Anything that looks like marketing instead of product, anything that looks like a lot of student loan risk is borne by the government instead of the student, or the school. Sorry, it's borne by the government instead of the school, and the student suffers until they go bankrupt. Like, those dynamics are terrible, and they ruin the education system. Mm-hmm. So if you have in our view, all those things are created a lot of problems, or obviously they create a lot of problems, but the solution is align the interests of the school with the students' interests, and you'll be better off. We can do that in vocational ed. We can do that in career acceleration. We can do that in boot camp education. We can do that in corporate training. We can do that in digital training. There's all sorts of sectors. Anything with an ROI can be done. Yeah.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think educational systems have to be more transparent, and I think you need to look at the numbers, the ROI, and actually be honest about that to both the students and the parents, and say, if you go into this on this path, this is what you're expected to return out of it, as opposed to, hey, whatever is going to be fun, whatever looks fun, whatever, like you said, the marketing aspect, this looks great, as opposed to this is their actual realistic job prospects when you get out. This is what you're going to achieve from it. So I think that's great. And I think that's wonderful that you guys are in a position to be able to pivot and constantly stay true to those numbers and be honest with your students and serve your students the best.
That's our goal, right? That's our goal, and we'll see. I mean, it's only going to get harder as we grow to keep our team focused on that kind of thing, and as market pressures take over. So that's the hope. And when you say 15 years, I think of that as a pretty big challenge over the next. And it's not just us; it's the whole industry. But yeah, that's the goal.
Well, Darrell, I appreciate you coming on the show. I know you're very, very busy, so I'll let you go here. But thank you very, very much. And where can people go to get more information from you?
They can go visit thinkful.com, thinkful.com. I almost forgot how to spell our own domain name. And you can email me directly, Darrell@thinkful.com, Darrell @thinkful.com. And thanks for having me on. It was a lot of fun. You're talking about my favorite topics. It's a lot of fun as always.
No, awesome. And for all you listeners out there, it sounds like your program is designed specifically to help students in mind and just be transparent and be honest about trying, helping your students. So that's great. That's wonderful to see that your company is doing that for people. So that's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, guys. Thanks for enjoying the episode. And until next time.
You assume they enjoyed it.
Of course they enjoyed it. But really, it was awesome to have Darrell on. I mean, obviously he's a very, very busy guy. He's doing a great thing for the community. We really appreciated having him on. It was really neat to talk to him.
Thanks for doing the interview.
Well,
I enjoyed it. It was good.
Maybe next time you'll do the interview.
Maybe. Well, we already have several scheduled out.
Well, that's
already,
true.
so
That's true.
It'll be a while before I'm back on.
Well, we heard it here, folks, though. You're going to be doing it. But anyway, thanks again, guys. And constantly stay reading, constantly be learning, and go against the grain. Later.